might be all about vehicles, but it's the people behind them who steer the real story. Welcome to Fleet Legends, an interview series focusing on passing down institutional fleet knowledge sponsored by Legend Fleet. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Bobbitt's VP of Content, and today I'm sitting down with someone who's helped shape this industry in more ways than one. Although she retired back in 2014, Debi McClendon is still one of those recognizable names in fleet and true pro with decades of lived experience who still continues to give back to our industry today. Welcome, Debi.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate it.
Well, let's go ahead and get right on into it. Every legend has an origin story. You want to tell us a little bit about how you got started in fleet?
As a lot of corporate America fleet managers experienced, especially back when I started, which was in 2000, you're pushed into an area that you have no knowledge about. And I was replacing a gentleman that was getting ready to retire. He was one that knew everything about cars. I knew nothing about cars other than to put gas in and get the oil changed. So
Mm-hmm.
intimidation was there following up. And before I came on board, it seemed to be mostly a good old boy system from his interpretation of what fleet was. So that's how I got thrust into it. So imagine a newborn baby now in a college atmosphere. That's kind of the way it felt. So
That's a really good way to put it.
I had to face a lot of challenges and changes that were needed because also at the time that he was retiring, we were also going through what I lived through 5 mergers. We were then going through maybe the second merger at that time. So not only are you looking at someone to bring fleet up to the night, up to the 21st century, but the company was also looking for someone who could also change the culture in fleet. So that was my role. And there were a lot of things, and we'll go into that later. I know you're going to ask me about that, but there were a lot of things that I had to learn how he was doing it and then learn how the company wanted it going forward and to really get out there and dig and find ways to make that happen.
So, not a tough thing to try to accomplish at all.
I had all black hair when I started in fleet, just to let you know.
Well,
No,
I
that's
mean, we've
joking.
definitely seen a lot of changes. Even the last few years, things have changed really quickly. In reflecting back on your fleet career, what was some of the most significant changes that you saw?
Again, I was in a situation where we're changing the culture of my company as well as changing fleet. Fleet was manual. He would go do everything, and now I have to come in and make it a process instead of a individual person service. So some of the challenges was to bring in this new paradigm or new culture change to our drivers. And at the time, there was no fleet policy, believe it or not. So the biggest challenge was to come up with a fleet policy across the board and to merge. We had probably about 7 different divisions at that time. And so I had to
Wow.
learn to merge their different practices into one fleet. So you can imagine that was a bit of a challenge. And doing that, I had to get buy in from the CEO, the COO, the CFO, and anybody's O to make that work. So to get a seat at the table, not knowing anything about fleet at the time was a bit of a challenge, but it was one that I took on and went through it with a lot of help. So we bought in a advisory board. Everything from our vehicles were not just for our sales team, it's also for our different divisional offices. And the company I worked for worked a lot with farmers. And so the type of vehicles we had to look at, I was looking for synergies to save money because we had everything from, I don't know, a Toyota or a Volvo to, the biggest F-350s. So trying to incorporate all of that into one fleet was a bit of a challenge. And it did take me about 6 to 9 months to come up with something that the higher ups approved of. Not everybody was happy with that, but it was something that was needed. And it was a significant cost savings to the company. Um, we changed the paradigm from thinking a fleet vehicle was a bonus or a gift or incentive to hire people, but instead it became a tool necessary to do their jobs. So
That's a
that was
big paradigm shift.
a big, big paradigm shift. The other thing, also going with moving to, and this was a couple of years after that, moving to how we can make fleet operate better is to outsource the fleet to a fleet management company. So now you're talking about a department of several people moving down to three at the time. And that was difficult because you were losing people. And now instead of managing people, we're now managing a process or a fleet management company. So there was a big paradigm change for me in fleet.
Creating a better day for the legends of the road with the non-slip van floors, protective interior liners, and full range of work van accessories. Trusted by major OEMs and fleets all across North America and Europe.
I mean, that's a lot of different people to get buy-in for a process. Just not even thinking about the executive leadership, but when you were talking about that many different divisions, that right there is a challenge, let alone I can imagine how it took a while. It wasn't an overnight process.
It was not. It was not. It was years really to get it to the point of total buy in. If you could imagine you're fresh out of college and you're being sought by a company because you have this sensational sales achievement even while you were in college, and they're telling you, come to my company and I'll give you this type of a vehicle. And then when you get there, they say, oh, you know what? That lady over there changed the policy. So now you are only going to get these vehicles that have been chosen for you because of the job you have. So I didn't make friends right away, but eventually I did because I also had to go to, especially the sales fleet, and see what kind of things they really did need in the vehicle that maybe they weren't getting before. And when technology kept changing, we always had to change the options that we gave them. So that was interesting.
Today's generations definitely take for granted automatic windows were not something that was just on every single vehicle.
They were not. Even back in the early 2000s, they were not. And that was the kind of things that we had to do. Also, we had to take out certain things. Even when the cell phones became very popular, uh, you could no longer. We jumped on that really early for safety reasons. That you are not going to ride around in that car on that phone. So we did allow them to mount it and use the speaker, and it had to come through the vehicle. So now we've got to buy vehicles that can accommodate that, as opposed to, I don't know what you're using before, but they could not ride up and down the street. They're mostly in the back roads and highways and things. They could not ride around with a phone to their ear and not keep their job.
So, I mean, we both know experience doesn't come easy. I think that was a big part of what we were just talking about. Let's get into some of the takeaways that I feel like you feel really stuck with you. What are some of the most important lessons you've learned in fleet that you think are crucial for some of the newer fleet managers to understand?
Building a strong network to me is one of the best lessons learned during my fleet career because I was just telling you, they eliminated people in their different roles, and I ended up being by myself eventually. It was because I went to different organizations such as NAFA and AFLA that I got to meet other fleet managers who also were having their own struggles and willing to share those struggles, really willing to give me advice on what they did or what they think is coming through, to go to classes. All of that was definitely needed in order to stay current and to learn how to get the fleet to the place that my managers were happy with. Um, that was the biggest lesson learned for me because I felt like I was on an island by myself. And even my competitors, even my business competitors, fleet managers, I remember us meeting at one of the meetings. It might have been a NAFA conference, I'm not sure. And we had a little luncheon meeting just to talk about the kind of vehicles that we were using and the challenges that we were having. And I wanted to have a notepad at lunch. I don't do that, but I wanted to have a notepad at lunch just to take notes. But I did get most of it to say that, hey, this competitor is doing this and we're not there. If we're going to stay competitive, at least with trying to recruit the kind of drivers that you want, we need to think about doing X, Y, and Z. So that was definitely one of the top priorities for me, or the top lessons learned for me. I always noticed that having written and oral communication skills, because you could go from the boardroom to the fields. I actually did audits at one time out in the field at farms. And to be able to talk to anybody on any level and make them feel like they are important too, because they are, was a lesson learned during my time in fleet. And
I love that tip.
and change. What constant? There's always going to be one constant as you live this life, and that's change. And in fleet, it's always going to be change. And being stuck in doing it the way you used to do it is not going to work. Always being open to change, even if it was stressful, which usually is, but being open to change, adapting to change, and bringing something to the table about change. So again, having the network that I did, I was able to get some ideas of what changes would work for my company. And staying relevant again is eh, being educated on fleet. I can't even imagine all of the new technologies. I do read a couple of things and listen to cars, of course, because that was my interest for the longest time, about all the different technologies. I have a car now that will park for me, and I never use it. So now is the day that people need are going to have to adapt to. We're coming to the new vehicles of what the Jetson. I'm dating myself, but the Jetsons was a cartoon back in the day that they were powered in these vehicles that would fly for you and drive for you. And we have the technology to do that now. It's a matter of selling it and making it affordable. So a fleet manager has to always stay on top of new technologies.
I do still feel like I'm one of those people who think it is a flex to be able to parallel park though. I enjoy a good parallel park and the pride that I get when that's been done.
Yes, me too. My dad spent a lot of time teaching me how to do that, so I keep that up.
Right? It is a flex. I've watched people try and try again. Okay, so one of my absolute favorite questions, this is kind of my time machine question. If you could hop into time machine and go back in time, what's one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
One of the things that I wish I knew before I started out is that no one person can do it themselves. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be vulnerable in some situations. The person that I replaced, it was a one man island. And when I went into the job, I thought that's what I had to be too. So that's one thing that I wish I knew ahead of time, that it is not a one man island. It's okay. It's okay. It's definitely okay to ask for help. And the thought that I was not insignificant, but not a person that could influence change. Again, I told you that because of all of these ways of saving money, that I actually got to go sit in the boardrooms from time to time. And it was intimidating, but it was needed in order to influence change. So I wish I had known ahead of time to prepare myself that I don't need to feel intimidated because I wasn't intimidated, and that I was a person who made significant changes for the company.
From your perspective, are there any rookie mistakes that you're seeing new fleet managers make or that you think that they should steer clear of right now?
I've been out of touch for a while, so I'm not really sure what the rookie mistakes would be at this point. I can tell you as what the rookie mistakes that I made again was thinking that I could not influence change, which I could. And then the other thing I think a rookie mistake might be that you think you're the only one that can influence change. Again, it's not a one man island, it's negotiations from every level. And I think a person who might be extremely knowledgeable about fleet itself, vehicles themselves, will have a different perspective than I did when I started. And because I didn't have that, I felt I was a little bit more vulnerable than some. So a rookie mistake to me would be to come in thinking you know everything and that you don't know anything.
Two sides of the coin that are equally as valuable.
Yes.
So I think, fleet is a balancing act. As we've talked about, it's people, processes, technology, and in your career, you definitely saw it evolve.
Mhm.
Thinking about what worked well, what practices or innovations have you found to be the most effective in managing a successful fleet?
Some of the things I felt in balancing best practices was two. When we moved from an in house fleet management situation to a corporate fleet management situation. And that was best for us because they had the people internally who had the knowledge base that it would take us a while to get. Even going to the
Mhm.
classes or staying in the magazines or watching the videos, you really can't keep up with, in the corporate situation, that is, really could not keep up with everything as well as that fleet management company could. Then the next thing I thought was bringing the drivers, safety, and procurement under one umbrella before everybody was doing their own thing, which is why I ended up with such a big variety of vehicles. And the safety department was separate. And so when accidents were happening, then they would come back and say, well, what type of equipment can we put on these vehicles that would make things safer? Or what kind of practices should we teach the drivers that would make them safer? So one of the things I did mention earlier is about that cell phone. That was a big, big, big battle. But of course, now with the distraction, you hear it on the news, you hear it on the commercials about being distracted. That was something that me as a fleet manager, the safety department's manager, as well as a procurement person came together. Procurement was one who helped with synergizing or getting one, and I'm getting ahead of myself, getting one manufacturer for all of our fleet. And that saved us a lot of money by doing that.
So, I mean, this one is probably one of the more loaded questions. We've touched on it here and there in the conversation so far, but I really don't think we can talk fleet without talking technology. And it's definitely evolved and come a long way. How do you think it's changing fleet management, and what advancements do you see being really the most game changing?
That's a good question. Technology is one I alluded to a little bit earlier. It's going to always be there, it's going to always change. You have to decide what is going to work best for your fleet. So, for example, most of the majority, 70% of the fleet was for salespeople. And the technology to put in the car to track where they're going as a means of trying to save money or rerouting, giving them the best routes, was not received well at all. As a matter of fact, we never did do that. That's a technology, telematics, I think it was called. And it was being pushed a lot at the time I was there. I'm not sure where it is at this point, but it just depends on your fleet. If you got a fleet of utility drivers and they're only supposed to go from point A to B, it might make sense. But for a sales team, it didn't. So again,
Hmm.
stay abreast of what the technology was. I went to several telematics classes when I went to conferences and read up on it, and it just was not something that was going to work for us at all.
I mean, overall, the one size fits all approach really doesn't work in fleet management. And I think, again, you alluded to it earlier, which was really understanding your fleet and its needs and how it operates and taking that into consideration when making decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know the biggest push now is probably about AI and managing that within your fleet. How is that going to work for you? I would caution that you be very careful and really get as much information about it as you can before you even take it or present it to the powers that be that can make that change.
You know, you mentioned that you had changing sizes of staff over time, and running a fleet is one thing, but leading a team, especially through ups and downs and staffing changes, is an entirely different challenge. What strategies have you used to build and lead a successful team?
That's a good question. To lead a successful team started off with sharing a vision. When I walked into the fleet, of course, we were also sharing a vision of a different culture. So, sharing the vision and explaining what that vision is, not just for your company, but for what you want the fleet to do or to be in the future. That was the first thing. Also, getting people on the team that are not necessarily in the fleet department, but have a big influence or big impact on making your fleet work. Just like I talked about the safety team, we brought them in and procurement, all those, their influence was needed in order for us to kind of, I would say, be on one page to make sure that the fleet was going to be the best that we could have. So, getting buy in from the team, of course, that's the most difficult because people basically don't like to change. And like I said, that is one constant. From here on, the rest of your life, you're always going to have a change physically
Yeah.
as well as the company. It's inevitable. So, getting buy in sometimes can be a bit of a challenge. My method is to lay it on the table. This is where we are. This is where we need to be. I would prefer that you would help to make us get there instead of fighting trying to get there. And listening to their ideas of what. So, once you lay it on the table, you want to hear their ideas of how you can make it work. That was one of my favorite things. Here's where we are, here's where we want to be. What are your ideas to make that happen? So, that's getting buy in from those people that are on your team. Communications and feedback. We had a tool of feedback of it was I'm missing the words, but it was pretty much what works,
Mhm.
what was difficult, and what could you do to make it better. And I to this day, even in church groups and volunteer groups that I work with now, I still use that. Let's look at what works well. Let's look at what was difficult and how can we make it better. That also gets buy-in for those people. My biggest thing is because I do like people and I do like to celebrate. I think milestone celebration as you go are very necessary to keep people motivated. If they work, 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 and they don't see that you appreciate them or that what they've done for the fleet, for your company, has not been significant, then they'll check out. So, milestone celebrations could be anything from a lunch to a little gift card or just a card to remember that their birthday is this month. So it doesn't have to be anything big or not, and especially nothing expensive, but it is the recognition to let people know that, hey, you're valuable. You've been an asset to this process. We need you now. We're going to need you in the future. Let's do this.
It's that we see you that matters so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're gonna hop back into that virtual time machine for a second, because we know the next generation is watching. They're looking to see, what do I want to be when I grow up, and we hope they choose fleet, either driving or fleet management. But we want them to join fleet, and it's constantly evolving. What advice would you give to new people joining fleet or looking at fleet for a career?
The advice I would give to people looking at fleet for a career is keep learning, stay relevant, and fight for a seat at the table. When I say keep learning, is you never learn everything. You're always in the classroom, basically. If you want to stay relevant, you got to keep learning. It's okay to let people know what you're doing. That to me was one of my pitfalls. I didn't let them know enough, but it's okay to let people know what you're doing. To fight for a place at the table is that you should be sitting at the board in the boardroom as well as in the field, and you want to make sure people understand what you're doing, how you're doing it, how this affects the company, how it affects them. And they might not like the answers, but they will respect the fact that you were there to give it to them.
Debi, I cannot thank you more for sharing your journey and these insights that you gained along the way. It's stories like yours that remind us that, like I said, fleet isn't just about vehicles and technology, it's the people driving the change.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, though, I'd love to make sure you have the last word. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the folks watching or to your fellow fleet friends that are tuning in?
Sure. First of all, my fellow fleet friends, I do miss you. I wish I could see you often. There are some that I still make phone calls every now and then because we were more than just colleagues. We have become friends. I appreciate all the advice and the love and support that you showed me over the years, and I really miss you. So, to you, thank you so much. The next thing I do want to say is to the new ones coming in is don't give up and never think that you're not important because you are. Even if you're sitting in a cubicle in a corner, you are important, you are needed. Fleet will never go away. Some form of fashion, people got to move from one place to the other, be it in a regular vehicle, a truck, or a spaceship, maybe in the future. Fleet will always be needed, so you are important. The last thing I'd like to say, Lauren, is thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and to even acknowledge me as a legend. I really do appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. And I miss my time with my fleet folks. But anytime you need some advice, I'm just a phone call away.
Well, they say once you fall into fleet, you stick around. So, Debi, again, thank you so much. And for everyone else, we hope you're walking away with some solid takeaways and maybe a little bit of inspiration too. If you got thoughts on this episode, drop them in the comments. If you know someone with a legendary story, tell me who you want me to talk to next. We've got more great conversations on the way, so stay curious, stay connected, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Fleet Legends.